Okay, Victoria, can you see me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, perfect. Victoria, how did you get started in journalism?
Well, it's going back quite a way now. Oh, I better mute. I'm getting quite a bit of feedback. I can hear myself in echo. Is there any way we can fix that?
Yeah, Scott, do you mind muting your mic just in case?
Yes, I can do that. That's fine.
Cool. There we go. All right, Victoria, how did you get started in journalism?
So it's going back a while now. I've been a journalist for 24 years. When I was 17, I had a bit of epiphany one day when reading what was then the Glasgow Herald. And I'd like to say it was for very noble reasons, but I wanted a job that I thought would be exciting and different, and that I'd get to meet a lot of different people and tell stories at the same time. So I had just left school. I didn't do particularly well in my final year, so I embarked on an HNC at Bell College in Hamilton, and I went to Motherwell College night school 2 nights a week, where I self-funded shorthand, and I got my shorthand qualification because I wasn't sure whether I would try and get straight into a job or actually go and do a qualification. But obviously when I was at Bell College, I met some great people. The lecturers there were fantastic. I don't know if any of them have moved on to UWS, but they gave me some solid advice, and I ended up doing an HND in journalism at Bell College. I did some work experience with my local paper, the Wishaw Press, during one of the summers. I volunteered, and I think because I was there unpaid for 5 or 6 weeks, that does stand you in good stead when you do things like that. It certainly did back in that day. And in my final year at Bell College, they actually offered me a part-time job as a junior reporter, and because I was really ambitious and really keen, and I had not one day off college, and the college agreed that they would let me continue with my studies and work. So essentially I got a job as a journalist, a junior reporter, in my second year at college. And after I graduated, I stayed at the Wishaw Press for about 6 months. I could ramble on. Please feel free if you want to interrupt it at any point. But I suppose my story from there is I worked at Wishaw Press doing all the cutting your teeth in local papers, which was a fantastic place to learn. I was surrounded by more experienced reporters. I was also thrown in at the deep end. I made cups of tea. I wrote a lot of picture captions. But most importantly, I learned the craft. I learned about making contacts, about keeping contacts, about cultivating, about finding stories, not just rewriting press releases. And you had the breadth at a local paper to do that. So it was a great learning experience for me. However, after about 6 months of counsel and writing about wheelie bin disputes, I really felt it was time to try and take it a bit further. So I got a job at a news agency in Aberdeen. At that point, it was called North Scot. It does exist, although it's been taken over by one of the larger English news agencies. I can't remember what it's called. But I moved up to Aberdeen. I was in a team of 4. It was a massive patch to cover. We wrote royal stories about agriculture. We were writing for all the national media. So, I remember one of my first ever splashes in the Sun was about Grampian Fire Brigade introducing white fire engines because it was cheaper not to paint them red. And that landed the day before April Fool's Day. It was March the 31st, and every news desk phoned up and said, is this an April Fool? And I'm like, no, this is real. Here are the quotes. We're not taking Mickey. And that story did exceptionally well. So what I'm trying to get at is that it was really varied. 1 minute you could be writing a 3,000 word in-depth piece on the fishing industry out of Peterhead. The next minute you could be writing a shagging story for the Sunday Sport. It was so varied. And I was working with journalists that had been around for a long time who really took me under their wing and taught me to drink. But it was a fantastic experience, and I stayed there for 2 years. Again, I felt that there was only so far my career could go at that level. It was also very low paid. Aberdeen was an expensive city. So I moved back down to Wishaw, back in with my parents, and I managed to get some shifts at the Daily Record. And back in those days, they were crying out for good freelancers, and I ended up getting 6 shifts a week. And then the Sunday Mail came along and offered me a shift on a Saturday, and that eventually turned into a staff job with the Sunday Mail. I seemed to slot into that, and I enjoyed what I did there. And I stayed at the Sunday Mail for about 18 months. Again, it was a steep learning curve. I was in my very early 20s. I was young to be at the Sunday Mail. I had a tiny contact book. So it was tough to come up with 2 or 3 really good stories that were exclusive every week. But, you know, I was the sweeper-upper in that I would help more experienced reporters with what they were doing. I'd work on the consumer column. I would do car reviews, as well as coming up with my own stories as a reporter. And I stayed there. Yeah, I was probably at the Sunday Mail for about 2 years, but I really missed the cut and thrust of daily news and breaking news. And a job at the Press Association came up in 2003, and that's when I joined the Press Association. That was 17 years ago, and I haven't looked back. Is everyone familiar with PA? Just nod.
Yeah, no.
You all know what we did. Do you get access to our feeds? Do you get to see any of our output or schedules or anything like that?
Quite a few people on who are staying silent, but we use it for their news days. We use MediaPoint.
MediaPoint, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you will notice in the coming months massive changes to MediaPoint. It's been totally overhauled. The way it is at the moment, it's not particularly fit for purpose. It's very old-fashioned. It's almost analog. Where they are introducing a new version of MediaPoint that it's going to be bang up to date. You'll be able to set it up a bit like TweetDeck. You'll be able to have everything in the one place rather than having to click on separate feeds. You'll have all your stories, your pictures, your video, your social, all relating to each story, all in the one place, easy access. And that, for journalists like yourself, should make life a bit easier. But yeah, so I ended up at PA in 2003 as a reporter, and it was fantastic. It was long days, long hours, but I worked with a fantastic team, and I got to cover some incredible stories and go some incredible places. You know, I was promoted to chief reporter in 2004. I'd only been there a year, and the opening came up, and I had a fair bit of experience behind me by then. One of the sort of biggest stories that I covered at that time would be the G8 summit at Gleneagles. I wasn't involved in covering the politics of it. We have a massive politics team at Press Association, both in Scotland and in Westminster, but I was there on the outskirts covering all the protests. I was in that field where the Chinooks came down and people were trying to get over the fence and it was all kicking off. And my team of reporters were just scooping up all the kind of the human interest stories around the outskirts. That was a great experience. I went to Iraq in 2006 when they merged the regiments. Then in 2010, I spent a month in Afghanistan on the front line with the Scottish troops. I felt it's really, really important to do things like that and to let the public back home know what these guys and girls on the front line were going through day to day. I could talk forever about the number of big stories that I've covered. You know, when you guys start your career, you will have an opportunity to cover some massive stories in your life. Look at what's happening to us just now. This is the biggest thing that I've ever seen in terms of the scale of the number of people affected, and now journalism is more important than ever because we've got to ask questions of people. We've got to hold to account our leaders, and we've got to relay information to members of the public. And there has been a lot of debate in recent years about quality of journalism going down, and maybe in some sections it has. But what we do fundamentally is incredibly, incredibly important. And regardless if people are reading their news online or in a newspaper or in a vlog or a blog, fundamentally telling a factual story or taking complex information and getting it out to the public in a simpler form at a time like this is absolutely vital. I'll probably talk about some of the changes in journalism in a bit. I know I'm going on a bit, but so I became editor in 2010. So that was a wee while ago. And I look after a team of journalists in Scotland. And PA produces between 40 and 60 stories every day from Scotland with a small team of journalists. We operate 365 days a year. We cover court, we cover crime. We've got a big politics team in Edinburgh. We tell our stories, by video, using iPhones, by using proper video cameras. We can do sit-down, proper edit interviews, or we can stand outside court with our iPhones and very quickly turn it around and have it Alex Salmond walking out of court within 10 seconds down to our London office, who then feed it out. We've got customers all over the world. I remember writing a story about Arbroath Smokies when they got their blue seal from the European Union, and I remember it made the front page of a big newspaper in India. So we have a reciprocal agreement with the Associated Press in that they can take whatever they like from us and put it on their wires, and we do the same with their stuff. So quite often I would write a story and you would see it in a newspaper on the other side of the world, but sometimes it would be stories that you didn't think would particularly see the light of day, but you don't know what appeals to certain audiences. We have general reporters in Scotland. We have politics reporters, sport, photographers, sub-editors. We have a page ready operation, which works out of the Glasgow office, where our sub-editors actually sub-edit pages of a national newspaper which is based in London. If you are in London and you buy that newspaper, those pages will have been subbed by a sub in Scotland. PA does a lot of things that people don't necessarily know about. Everyone thinks we're just a wire service, but we've got a lot of different successful businesses. At one point we owned Meteo Group, which was a weather forecasting company. We did sell that about 2 years ago, and that has become very, very successful in the last 10 years, and it now provides the weather for the BBC instead of the Met Office. So there's lots of different aspects to PA that people don't necessarily think about. Obviously, we are known for our wire service, and our kind of motto is we're fast, we're fair, and we're accurate. So yeah, that's me up to date. Please speak.
You've at different stages of your career, you've made jumps. You made a jump after 6 months, you made a jump after 2 years, and you've taken risks. How hard is it to make those decisions, to make that call, to walk away from employment to a different form of employment?
I think so. Probably the biggest one would be leaving the Sunday Mail and going back to PA, potentially would have been seen as a bit of at that time, maybe a backward step, or certainly a sideways step. But I think you've got to trust your instincts and do what makes you happy. Do what you feel you're good at, play to your strengths. The journey up until that point was a kind of natural progression, in that you start as a junior reporter, and then you move to an agency. You have a wider audience. You're dealing with national newspapers instead of local newspapers. From the news agency to the Daily Record, again, that was a natural progression. At the local paper and the news agency, I've mentioned I was incredibly low wages. They didn't have a minimum wage at that point, but I was well below it and struggled to make ends meet when I was in Aberdeen. So by the time we got to kind of the record level, it was a bit more comfortable and in a position to then really sit down and think, what is it that I want to do? And I really, when I got offered the job at Press Association, I just absolutely jumped at it, because I knew what the Press Association was the scope that it had, the reach that it had, and to an extent the reputation that it had. I knew people that had worked at Press Association, and just to, at that point, it appealed to my ego to have that on my CV as well. But 17 years later, you know, it was a big decision to stay there for so long. There have been other opportunities put my way on this journey, but I decided to stay put at PA because I really enjoyed what I was doing. I think as editor, and in an environment where there have been lots of cutbacks, and the workload just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I think that role has a shelf life. It's not possible to work 60, 70 hours a week, be on call 24 hours a day for a sustained period of time. I think I'm at 10 years almost, and I think, you know, I'm not sure how much more I have to give in terms of working at that level. I'm still in love with journalism, but I might be looking to take it in a different direction again and make a big decision. But yeah, I'm full of admiration for PA, Press Association. They do something that no one else can do, and they do it very, very well.
The longevity you've had in your career over the last 2 decades, and I suppose the security you've had, will not exist for the students who are on this call moving forward. What advice do you have for them to prepare them for an industry that's been at a crossroads for some time?
I think just at this stage in your careers is to really arm yourself with as many skills as you can. I don't know what your syllabus is. I do believe in work experience. I think it's very, very important. It's how I got my foot in the door, and at PE, I've always encouraged people to come to PE and get their foot in the door. I gave one person a job after a stint as a reporter. He spent 8 weeks with us. He was at RGU. They've got a really strong work experience programme. They'll send people out for a month, out for 3 months at a time. Coming, doing work experience for a week somewhere, in my opinion, it isn't great. It doesn't particularly benefit you, and it's always very little benefit to us, but that's not why we do it. But if coming for a longer period, it makes such a big difference because the student learns so much. They are given opportunities. The guy that I was talking about in his first week, and as he was an undergraduate, got to interview Alex Salmond, who was First Minister at the time. And, you know, on a CV at that stage, you know, it's massive. He's now, it was 6 or 7 years ago, but he's now a reporter with the BBC and doing it exceptionally well. And he worked with PA for a year. But my advice to you is take everything that you're offered, try and get some work experience, and make as many contacts as you can. Jobs for life in this industry, really, they don't exist anymore. So the more news editors that you know that you're talented and can do the job, the more work that will come your way.
If you could list one highlight and one low point over the last 2 decades of your career, what would the highlight be and what would the low point be?
Gosh, I think one of the highlights for me is that I was given the opportunity to travel the world with PA. Before I joined PA, I'd never been outside Europe, and today I've been in over 50 countries. I've been in 2 war zones. Spent a week with a tribe in Kenya. I've got to meet some fantastic people. But if for one single highlight, I think probably going to Afghanistan with the army, and that was a real privilege, I felt, and to experience exactly what they were experienced. We weren't kept back. We were in the thick of it, and it was a real eye opener, and it was very humbling and probably changed me as a person. I think I became a little bit less of a twat after that, if I'm allowed to say that. So yeah, that would be a highlight, just in terms of the absolute visceral experience of being there. and the people that I met and the way that I was treated was incredible. A low point, I think, for me, and without getting too personal, but when I was young and ambitious, I was never fazed by door knocks. No matter how sad, no matter how dangerous, it was something that you just got on with, you did, and there was probably the kind of thrill, and the person inside me actually quite enjoyed it. I think the turning point for me was I was sent to Barra up north, and well, it was actually, there was a family of 4 had been wiped out in an accident in bad weather. They'd been blown off a causeway and they all drowned in their cars. And I remember knocking the door, walking up to the door with a feeling of dread and guilt. And I think that was a turning point for me. I was a little bit older. I'd suffered bereavement in my own life. And I thought, this isn't an aspect of the job that I really want to do anymore, but it was an important aspect and that has to be done. And, you know, actually, the uncle came out and spoke. He wanted to speak to the media. So sometimes when you expect a door in your face, you get the exact opposite. More often or not, you get a door in your face. But door knocks are becoming a thing of the past. You've got social media now, which is your door, really. So yeah, I think that was a low point for me. Redundancies, seeing some of my friends being made redundant in recent times is been a real low point, and one, you know, you could cry actually. Some of the way that the executives treat the newspaper industry, it's heartbreaking. But you know, over the 24 years, I think I got in just in time. I've had a tremendous career, probably last of the old school, if that's not being egotistical, but I certainly saw a bit of the good old days. And I've been trying to move with the times, keep up with technology. It's difficult. It's difficult because I feel old now. But I think, you know, I do have a lot to offer in terms of the experiences that I've had.
I'm going to stop it there, and I'm going to mute my microphone.
Okay.
If anyone else wants to unmute their microphone and ask a question, you guys can fire ahead.
Go on, don't be shy.
So in these very uncertain times with coronavirus, there's a lot of industries that are going to suffer when we come out of this terrible time. How's it going to affect you guys down there at the PA?
At PA, because we are owned by shareholders, so all the newspaper groups or certain newspaper groups and media groups are own us. We have a board of directors. What we do, given the way the newspaper industry is at the moment, is considered essential, because while newspapers cut back on staff, they rely on PA more and more. So I do believe that PA will cope better than some other individual newspapers. I mean, I'm sure you saw the announcement last night from NewsQuest about what's happening there. I don't envisage anything like that happening with PA.
I mean, it must be quite difficult for you guys to find stories, but at this time, you know, it's harder.
No, not at all. Because PA is a trusted source, we are given updates before everyone else. We're given press releases before everyone else. We have had home workers. We've had a home working policy for a couple of years. The offices were in Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Belfast and Dublin all have closed down in the last 10 years, and the teams all work from home and are used to finding stories via social media, etc., rather than being in an office and answering the phone. There's so much news out there. There are so many stories that need to be told throughout this. Our political guys, it's the busiest they've been, and given that we've had a referendum, we've had countless elections and votes, to find them in this busy spell, even when Parliament is shut, because people have to ask questions of our leaders in a time like this, and that's only right that happens. We're not sensationalists, you know, we are fair and balanced in what we do. We're neutral at all times, at least we try to be, and that for me as an editor in the run-up to the referendum, that was vitally important. There were never any accusations against us, which meant that I did my job. You know, if we pissed one side off, we made sure we pissed the other side off. That was just a good joke. But no, that probably did happen. So no, this is an exceptionally busy time for PA because people are relying on PA because of the nature of how we operate. You only need to look at some of the tabloids and you hear words like chilling and all the big sensational headlines. We don't do that. We just tell it how it is and keep it balanced. And I think now more than ever that is needed. But that was a good question. Thank you.
Remember Scott Gibson if he goes for a job, Victoria.
Yeah, please do.
He's also from your neck of the woods.
Was that right?
I'm a Carluke boy.
Oh, Carluke. Okay.
Yes, I heard you mention Wishaw earlier, and I refrained from calling it Pishy Wishy. So.
Pishy Wishy. Well, and do you know what we're known as in Wishaw?
What's that?
Wee shites.
Yes, that's a very familiar phrase.
Good to meet you.
Lovely.
Okay, can I be heard? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, that's good then. Sorry, I was having a lot of technical problems and I had to go out and check my son and stuff. So, but it's fine. Should be working now. Yeah. So when you were in Afghanistan, then were you ever in situations where you thought my life's in danger here? I need to be, really, really careful about what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why it was important to be there, because the men and women that were there for us, their lives were in danger. So there was no point in going to Iraq and Afghanistan and hiding away at one of the big bases and telling stories from there. It was important to go out and experience and feel the fear and the nerves that they do. I was there for a month. They were there for 6 months at a time. I wasn't there as a war correspondent, anything like that. I was not there for politics. I was there to tell stories about what these people were doing. First stop was I interviewed lots of medics at the field hospital in Bastion, where they were using pioneering techniques to treat these guys that had been hit by IEDs and were losing limbs. And just, the hours that they were working and just having a look in the hospital was absolutely incredible. But then we flew down to Lashkar. While I was there was a squaddy was killed, and to actually feel the devastation from his comrades was something else. So I don't have children, and at that point in my life I was single, so I didn't have to give much consideration. I could be selfish on that front. My situation is different now. Would I do it again? 10 years older, 10 years wiser? Maybe not. I don't know. Again, and maybe that would be considered selfish too. But certainly at that time, I felt it was very important to go out there and tell the stories. In the month that I was in Afghanistan, we didn't come under attack at all, apart from one person took a pot shot at a patrol base that I was in at Nadi Ali, but you could hear that in the distance and I didn't feel particularly threatened at that point. In Iraq, we were attacked 5 times in the space of a week. We had missiles coming in and mortars coming into the base. It was my 30th birthday, I remember, and the captain that I got was with got me a can of Iron Brew and a box of chocolates. It's just things that you don't expect, but that's the kind of camaraderie that you have in the army. They all look out for each other. But that night we were outside. It was called the Shat Al Arab Hotel. It was a hotel that was turned into a headquarters for the British Army, and it was a Chinese-made rocket came in. It was fired by insurgents and it landed 100 feet from where we were. And yeah, I was pretty petrified. You could hear it, you could smell it, you saw it. You saw there's a tail of light, and you felt the ground move when it hit. So yes, you feel vulnerable, but I think you just learn to live on your nerves and try and get on with it. On both occasions, I was utterly exhausted when I came back, and needed, about a week to recover. Something that I didn't consider. But yeah, incredible experience. Also in Afghanistan, we went in summer. It was 50 degrees every day, and you're not allowed short sleeves. You've got to cover up in case of flash burns. So that in itself was a challenge to stay alive in that environment. But the captains or the majors that you're with made sure that you were well hydrated and looking after yourself.
Do you think that going out to these places was something that was more an experience than something that actually benefited your career, or do you think it did actually benefit your career?
I told a lot of important stories when I was there. At that time, one of the Afghan army soldiers had turned his rifle on several British soldiers, and there was a lot of questions about why are we still there and why are we mentoring them. And I think I was able to speak to the people, the soldiers that were mentoring these guys, and they explained in their words why it was so important that had to continue. So it was, while there was a lot of fear for the people back home as to what was happening to their loved ones and why they were there, I think to hear from them and look at the bigger picture, the quicker that we can get these guys trained up and fighting for themselves or defending themselves, the quicker then we would be able to withdraw. So has it benefited my career? No, it's benefited me as a person, definitely. It's on my CV, but I think collectively, years' experience as a journalist, benefit you as you go on. Yeah.
Any other questions, folks?
Shorthand. I was going to ask about shorthand.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel it's possible, if your shorthand's not great, to sort of still get on in journalism today?
This is something that I'm continually asked as an employer of journalists. And it's very much just my opinion. It's not I can't speak for anyone else, and I'm not speaking on behalf of PA, but I wouldn't employ someone as a news reporter that doesn't have shorthand. Now, I'm not saying it has to be 100 words a minute, but you have to have some sort of shorthand, because as a PA reporter, you would be sent to court, and you need to have pristine notes, and you need to keep them for years, and because they can also be used in it. So it really depends what sort of journalism you want to do. If you're able to do shorthand, I would suggest you do it. If you're not able, then yeah, there are alternatives. You just can't use them in court. So that's my stance. If I was interviewing someone for a job, for instance, who physically couldn't do shorthand, then I wouldn't hold that against them at all. You look at all their other attributes, and you look at where you can deploy them and what they can do. So it's not the be all and end all. But I would suggest if you're being offered shorthand, then do it, then take it. It's an absolutely brilliant skill to have. I can't write in longhand anymore because I'm just so used to writing in shorthand, and I wouldn't say my shorthand's great, to be honest. Reportage is very different to it was in my day when you relied on your shorthand. I mean, I had a tape recorder that was that size, and you can't really pull that out all the time. Now it's, you can do it on your phone, it's no problem, or you can get one of these digital ones. But I would suggest that if you have the opportunity to learn some shorthand, then I would.
Alex, Callum, Esther, John, any other questions before we bow off?
No. Well, thank you guys for your questions and for turning up, and for anyone watching this later, thank you. I hope it's been useful. Feel free to contact me if you've got any other questions. I remember what it's like being at your stage and raring to go. And I just wish you all the best and keep safe. And for those that are out working today and couldn't be here, thank you so much for keeping all our essential services going. We owe you guys and girls a debt of gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Victoria's email if possible.
Thank you. Thanks.
John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you want the last word?
No, you're all right. It's okay. I think everything was covered there, James. I'm all right.
No worries. Victoria, thank you so much. And thanks for being a UWS alum. And take care, everybody. We'll be back next Wednesday.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.